Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to such a great event. When Mike Klassen and Daniel Fontaine reached out to me to be a part of this, there was no question that I wanted to be here. Primarily because this is an issue that is so close to my heart, not only as a journalist who has done reporting on challenges related to seniors and living in isolation and living alone, but also as a daughter of an aging parent. My mom has Alzheimer's, my dad is a senior, and I think like a lot of people in this room and a lot of people in our community, I have to juggle the challenges of having a young family. I have a toddler and a teenager, and I have two parents that need my help. And so this topic, I think, touches so many of us, not only those who work in the sector, but just as people, right? Just with our population aging the way it is. I want to thank Rexall Health Solutions for your kind words, introduction, and also for sponsoring such a great event, because we wouldn't be here without them. And also thank you to the BC Care Providers Association and the BC chapter of Canadian College of Health Leaders for making this event possible. I'm going to sit down now because I don't like to stand. We have an amazing group of panelists here to shed light on this topic, so I'm going to take some time to introduce each one, and I guess as I introduce them, you can come up. But before I do that, I mentioned a little bit about myself as a person in this community, as a daughter, and it was mentioned a little bit about the work and the reporting I've done on this topic. My interest in seniors living alone actually came pretty organically after the windstorm that we had here in Vancouver in 2015. I live in the West End, which is a community that has an incredibly high number of seniors. And I live in an apartment. And I like to think that I'm a friendly person who talks to people and gets to know my neighbors. But it was during that windstorm and after the aftermath of it that I learned that there was a woman, an elderly woman living in my building, several floors above me, who, because the power had been out for several days and our generator only kicked in to have lights, the elevator didn't work. And because there was no electricity, her phone did not work. And she was alone for 5 days, and no one knew. And that was a story that I, or a situation rather, that I just came across as a human living my life. And I couldn't help but wonder how many other people are in that situation. So I reached out to a number of community partners. I see Anthony Cooper-Schmidt from the West End Seniors Network here, and was connected with a bunch of seniors. And it was really important to me to tell stories not only about seniors struggling and challenging, in challenging situations living alone, because there are so many, and I still think every single day about, and that's not an exaggeration, every single day I think about one of the women who I interviewed, who we referred to as Mary for her privacy. But she mentioned how she can go for weeks without even speaking to a single human being, because she will be around and people will not even say hello. But also the stories of seniors who are thriving. So, and there are many of them, thriving, living alone, and what makes that? So that's why I'm here. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. But let's bring up our amazing panel. First, with Kristine Theurer. Did I say that correctly? Kristine is a researcher who's pioneered the use of standardized peer support programs to address loneliness and social isolation in seniors living. She's a published author for a number of articles, most recently The Need for a Social Revolution in Residential Care, which is the most downloaded article in the Journal of Aging Studies, which is fantastic. As a journalist, I will tell you, those downloads and clicks, that's a big deal. Kristine is currently continuing her research as a PhD candidate at UBC, and Kristine leads training workshops for staff working in healthcare in Canada and the US and presents regularly at international conferences. Kristine will give you a little bit of an opportunity to introduce yourself and make some opening remarks as well, as will all of our panelists. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Andrew Wister, who's a professor and in the Department of Gerontology at my alma mater, Simon Fraser University. Dr. Wister is currently the director there and a professor, where he spearheaded the development of the master's and PhD programs in gerontology. He is internationally recognized as an expert in aging issues, policy research, and has been an active member of the Canadian Association of Gerontology, receiving the Distinguished Member Award in 2014. And now I just being here for a few moments, I realize almost a lot of people know you. You're a big deal, so come on up. Barb Maclean is the Executive Director of the BC Family Caregivers Network. Barb has over 30 years experience in nonprofits, in the government and private sectors as well, and she spent many years developing in the development of developmental disabilities field, specializing in supporting some of the most complex and challenging individuals in home, in residential care, and in school settings as well. Barb knows firsthand what it's like to juggle work, the young family, caregiving, and she supported her family during her own mother's fight with cancer. I think a lot of us will identify with that. Thank you, Barb, for being here. And we have Grace Balbutin, who is the director of the Seniors Abuse and Information Line. Grace came to Canada in 1998 from the Philippines, where previously she had worked in human resources for a big manufacturing company. But after she came here, she became involved in the nonprofit field. Her work experience includes frontline work in rape crisis and transition house lines, and information and referral, specializing in a number of different fields. She joined Seniors First BC in 2008 to help establish systems and protocols for the Seniors Abuse and Information Line, the Elder Law Clinic, and Victim Services Program. And she's currently, as I mentioned, the director of the Senior Abuse and Information Line and the program manager to Community-Based Victim Services Program. So, Grace Balbutin. I think we'll start by having everybody just make a few opening remarks. We'll start with Kristine.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much to BC Care Providers for setting up this event. I'm thrilled to be here, and it sounds a bit odd, I think, being happy about talking about loneliness and social isolation, but I am, because I really believe that the profile of the issue needs to be raised, and when the Minister of Loneliness was appointed, I was like, whoop, whoop, I was really happy about that, because through my work, as you mentioned, Charmaine, that I've been working in senior living for many years. I started out as a music therapist, and then I was a volunteer coordinator, and then I was a recreation director. Back then, people just moved around and did anything, There was an opening, they said, well, you look like a good person to do that. Anyway, but I've gone back to school because I often was overwhelmed by this feeling of there's way too many of them, meaning the residents in these homes that I work at, and not enough of us. And I could see the loneliness, I could feel it. I would walk down the hallway, and these, residents would reach their arms out to me, and they'd want to talk to me, but I would be on my way to doing something, and I would feel like I can't stop and talk to you because I have a schedule. And that overwhelming feeling that I got almost every morning when I went to work motivated me to try and do something different. And so I went back to school. I had the honor of working with Dr. Wister at Simon Fraser University when I did my master's, and I lived through a stats class with him. No, he was fantastic. He was so kind. And anyway, I think that loneliness and social isolation is such an epidemic in residential care in other parts of our communities as well. But that's kind of my specialty, and so I'm thrilled to be here. I really hope that what we're doing here today will help to continue to raise the profile of social isolation and loneliness, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it with you.
Thank you, Kristine. Dr. Wister.
I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. You even have my students here. I'm really excited to be here, and I feel this is an extremely important topic area for a number of reasons. First of all, I just stepped down as chair of the National Seniors Council of Canada, and we spent 3 years on this topic, and I went around the country having regional workshops and national workshops, speaking to seniors, to individuals related to seniors organizations, government, all levels of government, etc. And I'm telling you, we've just scratched the surface on this. And this is extremely timely and topical. The second reason is my mom is 92 years of age, and she lives alone in a house in London, Ontario. And she's quite isolated, except for a few visits from family. She's lost all of her friends, virtually all of her friends and acquaintances. And yet she doesn't feel lonely. So I think that will probably transition us into one of our initial discussions. In any event, thank you for inviting me, and I think this is going to be a really exciting panel.
Thank you, Dr. Wister. Barb.
It's a pleasure to be with you all together today. What a topic. I invite you to include in our lens of discussion and thoughtfulness, not just those alone seniors, but the people that care for them, our family and friends, and not just in residential care, but across the continuum where we live, work, and play. And that one of the most invisible groups right now in our society that's only going to become more invisible unless we change is the role of the family caregiver, the family and friend. And for my purposes today, by definition, a family caregiver is who you say it is. So in our health system and in our communities, that role is incredibly pivotal. 80% of the care is by that group, and yet most of the time we don't talk about them, think about them, or support them. So in my world, with Family Caregivers British Columbia, we're really invested in elevating from invisible to visible, from excluded to included, and from unsupported to supported. And they represent a very big piece of the isolated pie and the lonely pie of seniors in our communities. So imagine you're caring, and I know a lot of you would put your hands up. In fact, let's do it. How many people in this room are caring for somebody or have done it in the past? Okay, so how many hands do you see, Andrew?
I didn't count fast enough, but I see about half.
Okay, so he's the statistician. All right.
I did my calculator.
Okay, and if you didn't put your hand up, you will. If we did this in 10 years, your hands will be up. 20 years, guaranteed. And our hope is that as we grow as a society, we come up with mechanisms to alleviate, to prevent that sense of isolation and loneliness, and that sense of not sure who's going to care for us, that maybe we're more thoughtful planners into the future. So I'll stop there. But yeah, Family Caregivers, and we represent an organization to support that group.
Thank you so much, Barb. And Grace.
Thank you for inviting me. Social isolation in terms of the Seniors First BC where I work at is equated with elder abuse. The impacts of social isolation on elder abuse, the vulnerability of the person, they're all in tandem. So I would like to bring into the conversation the impacts of social isolation on people who are being abused and how they deal with that. And often the issue around elder abuse is something that people don't want to talk about, and even older people don't want to acknowledge that they are being abused because of the stigma around that. And what I want to bring into the conversation is how we deal with that and how we respond to people who are abused, isolated, and vulnerable. And in the Seniors Abuse and Information Line, we received about 4,000 calls a year, and about 70% of them are around older women who are calling us. It's surprising that the people who call us are mostly women in their 70s, 80s, and some of them, I've talked to someone who's 100 years old and still able to talk about the situation. And often they talked about being isolated, no family. Most of them are probably, I'd say, living alone. A lot of the population in British Columbia, they live alone. There's very few who have called us from residential care facilities, and so I know most of you are from the residential care facility section, but I'd also like to bring about the fact that the Office of the Seniors Advocate said something about seniors who are living in residential care facilities feel isolated, so that's something that I also want to talk about as well, and find solutions as to how we can address that. And that's all I can say. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you to our amazing panelists. So we're going to start off by asking some questions and having the panel give answers in the hopes that we can come up with some solutions here and some ideas. But if you have questions that come up in your head, keep them, because there will be an opportunity for you to be able to ask questions from the panel as well. So first off, we're here, we're talking about social isolation, and we're talking about loneliness, and often these terms are used interchangeably, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly. So let's start off by figuring out what exactly are we talking about here, a definition for what social isolation means, what loneliness means, and how can we distinguish loneliness from social isolation? Who would like to take?
I can start. So in the concept of the Seniors Abuse and Information Line and Seniors First BC, when you say you're lonely, it's a feeling that you're not satisfied with the people around you, what they're saying to you, what they're doing to you. Whereas for me and my colleagues at Seniors First BC, social isolation is a lack of connection to your community, to the society where you live in, or to the politics around you, and to anything. So it's not just a feeling, it's more of a connection. The way you access services, the way you're able to, say, for example, commit yourself into civil society. So that's where the thing. People can be isolated physically, but yet they're connected socially. And people can be lonely, yet they're all over the place talking, but they're not feeling any sort of connection. So that's how I define it in my own perspective at Seniors First BC.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that too, that I was just reading a paper by a group from the University of Winnipeg that they published about social isolation and loneliness, and what they talked about is that there's kind of 4 groups of it. There's people who are socially isolated but not lonely. There's people who are lonely but not socially isolated. There's people who are both, they're lonely and socially isolated, so that's the most vulnerable group. And there's people who are not socially isolated and not lonely. So there's kind of like these 4 groups of people, and they're very distinct and have different needs, and so that's why it's really important, I think, to differentiate between the 2 of them. Absolutely. Like the people who are not socially isolated but lonely could often fall within residential care. So even the people have said to me when I interviewed them in my research, I would say, how are you doing? And this one woman said to me, my room is at the end of the world. And I'll never forget that, because she really changed my life, because I realized that, I said to her, how can you possibly be lonely? There's like 240 people who live here. There's something like 400 staff that work here. And you see people, breakfast, lunch, and supper. How can you possibly be lonely? And she says, well, we don't talk. We talk about the weather, we talk about what we're wearing, but we don't talk about what's going on in here. So that's why it's so important. It's kind of called lonely in a crowd, that. And I think in residential care, it's very, very common. In fact, 1 out of every 2 residents talk about being chronically lonely in residential care. So this is significant help.
Yeah, and that really illustrates, I think, the difference. Dr. Wister?
Yes, I would add that both loneliness and social isolation are important. They overlap, and then there's distinctions as well. But what's particularly important is the prevalence. And if we look at people 65 and over, about 1 in 4 people express feeling lonely or feel that they are isolated, whichever term you use, the subjective or more objective characteristics. With respect to chronic levels, which I think are more associated with various risk factors, which I'm sure we'll talk about, you're looking probably at about 10%, but that's a significant number. And then there's those who experience episodic types of loneliness or social isolation. Maybe it's just a period of time, maybe after widowhood, maybe after a health crisis, etc. And those people, again, are at risk. So there's a lot of nuances here with respect to both the definition and the prevalence of this particular social issue.
Now, we know it, and you mentioned that's a significant number of people who are impacted by either social isolation, loneliness, or both, and our population is aging, so we can only think about how that's going to increase. Who does this impact the most? Are there pockets or communities that that isolation or loneliness or both impacts more than others? Whether it be marginalized communities or others. Anybody want to take that on?
I'd be happy to jump right in.
Yeah, please, Barb, go ahead.
All right, I suppose you look at the different variables that affect isolation and loneliness, and those 2 pockets of the experience people have. When you think about losing your social network for any reason, and then when you're caring, just by nature of maybe caring for somebody with dementia, your social circle over time just shrinks like this. And at the same time, your social connections shrink. Your ability to go out also shrinks. Your level of care expands, so that almost inverse relationship. So as somebody's condition, disease, disability gets worse, the level of care increases and your connections slowly disappear. And so that arrangement in life, when we look forward, is a disaster or a recipe for disaster. So I think about that particular group of people that are caring and the care recipient as dyads or couples, spouses in particular. Some of your research at the Seniors Council identified spousal caregiving as one of the risk factors associated with loneliness and isolation.
I'm struck by the range of vulnerable groups that fall into this category. It's caregivers, people living alone, it's marginalized groups, LGBT, people who are new to Canada, individuals experiencing physical or mental health problems, people living in rural remote areas and institutions. It cuts across so many different groups. And what is really striking, I think, is that quite often it's combinations of these situations that really increase the level of vulnerability, which places people at risk of the deleterious effects associated with social isolation and loneliness.
Now, it's pretty easy to talk about problems because I think a lot of us can identify problems. But what do we do about it? And what is being done about it? So let's start, I guess, with a conversation about what's being done. We have government groups, various stakeholders trying to do different things to address the challenges around this topic. What's your gauge? And we'll start with you, Kristine. What's your gauge on what's being done so far? Is it enough?
Well, just to answer that question, the answer is no. But I think I just want to add to that question that looking at the impact of loneliness that we talk about, and my focus has always been on residential care, but we know that people who are lonely are more likely to be hospitalized. People who are lonely are more likely to get cancer. I know that we were talking about smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I've heard that statistic is going around. It's a higher risk factor than obesity. And people who are lonely are more likely to get dementia. And if you have dementia, and the rate of dementia progresses faster. So all of those things, if you put them all together, it's really staggering. And if you think that in residential care, it's 1 out of every 2 residents report feeling chronically lonely. That way, if that was anything else, if that was any other kind of an illness, I think the entire nation would stand up and say this is unacceptable. But because it's older, seniors, it's kind of like this accepted cost of getting old. And so one of the things that this paper that we were talking about earlier, the need for a social revolution, you can just Google the paper if you'd like to download it. But
Nice plug.
But what I wrote about in that paper, I had a team writing. It wasn't just me, but we talked about this thing that we have in our society. And it's not just in residential care, but we have this relentless focus on entertainment and distraction. And we think that is the solution. We think that if we take lonely people and get enough of them together in a room and provide them with entertainment and distraction, that they'll do better. And the truth is, actually, if you take a lonely person and you put them in a big room with other people, it makes things worse. And so what I talked about in this revolution is that we have to turn that whole thing around and stop doing this thing that we do. We have this relentless focus, and it seems in all the years that I've worked over 20 years in these different recreation departments, and it's still the same. It has not changed at all. And we just keep doing it. We keep taking people and giving them entertainment and distraction, thinking that that's going to help, and it makes the matter worse. So what I'm saying about turning it around is that we need to shift it from less of what we can do to and for them, and more about what they can do for one another. And so that's where I talk about peer support as a model of care that we need to integrate into our psychosocial care in residential care, and also in the community in different ways. And so what I've been doing with these programs, so I've developed a series of programs called JAVA. So one's called JAVA Music Club, one's JAVA Memory Care. And people often say to me, why did I call it the JAVA Music Club? It's because I didn't want to call it a psychosocial therapeutic peer support group, because nobody would know. I had to give it a name that was kind of unique, and we serve coffee, and we chat. So it's a peer support group that connects people, that lets residents get to know each other on a different level than they do sitting around the dinner table. So I'll stop with that. But
No, that's fantastic. That's great. That certainly sounds like something that can be done. Is there a role for government in any of this?
yes, there is, because what I know now, since the Java Music Club has come out in 2011, it's now in over 800 organizations across Canada, and now in the US, Brookdale in the US has just taken on. They did a pilot with 100 homes last year, and it went really well. So now they're doing another 100. So I'm just saying that the concept is peer support, residents helping residents. Not us doing things to them and for them, doing things at them, but them helping each other. And I think that this whole focus of peer support, unless you've actually experienced it, what peer support is like to actually sit in on a peer support group, it sounds like, oh, what is it? It's like people kind of hang out with each other, but it creates this empathy that goes to the root of who we are, that we're a social being. We need to connect with each other. And when we're separated and isolated, which happens so much in residential care, people really suffer, and physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And the way to fix that is to have peer support groups. And peer support groups are free. Anybody can do them. You don't need Java anything to do a peer support group. But what we found is that people won't do it unless there's a structured, standardized program. And so to answer your question, even if you put the best programs in place, they can just get wiped out by a change of administration. They can just get taken away. And I've experienced that. I've seen that happen So what I think is that it needs to be a mandate, because it's not just my research that's showing that peer support groups reduce loneliness in a significant way. There's a lot of research that's out there showing that. So it needs to be mandated. And there's a paper that just came out, and I'll stop with this, but there's a paper that was written called Social Care, What Social Care? And it was written by Dr. Alex Haslam, University of Queensland. And he talks about how that all the research in the world that, that Andrew's doing, that I'm doing, that's going on out there, will not mean anything unless the government steps in and mandates. Because it will, otherwise it's just at the whim, and people will just default back to the traditional thing of creating like social events, which has happened, unless it becomes part of our culture, standardized part.
Now, Barb, you're on the ground.
I'm just, okay, so you started out by saying, what do we have now?
Yeah.
And is it enough? Two different questions. So we know it's not enough, so let's put that over here and focus on the positive.
Yeah.
And that is, there's a tremendous amount of programs, and you just look at the work you've been doing, it's amazing. It's like, okay, I thought I should jump in and say, help me, Michael, we are creating a list or an inventory of some of the things that we've mentioned today, so you don't have to keep it in mind. You can go onto the website later, and we'll be adding to it as ideas come up. So it's like the loneliness pot of solutions, or the charity chat, busting the, what's the title today? Anyway, we're dealing in possibilities, right? So we need to get our hands on all the good stuff, and I happen to know there's a ton of good stuff, and I'm very excited about it. So on one hand, it's absolute misery to know and experience every day, because we operate a caregiver support line across BC, and I know what firsthand it feels like and sounds like, the tremendous pain that people are in when they are lonely, isolated, discouraged, distressed. We can change this, but we want to actually identify how to change it. But the second challenge is, how do we get it into all of our hands so that we're able to use it? So that is a challenge. So that repository or that idea, and there's some thoughts around hub development and how it is in our sectors, because there's a number of sectors here, not just health. How it is that we share the good stuff. So good stuff. Peer support models in community have been around for a very long time. They're evidence-based. How exciting to know that they can be applied in residential care. It's something that we use, and I know the Alzheimer's Society, I think someone's here from that organization today. It is a tested and true model to engage people experiencing something to come together to alleviate a psychosocial need. And loneliness is a psychosocial need that can be met very inexpensively and very effectively. So we've got a number of support groups, and no caregiver in British Columbia needs to care alone. There's access to support groups, empathic responses through the caregiver support line, and so on. So there's an intervention. So there's a caregiver support line. So all of you know now that there is help for anyone living in BC who has a caregiving need. We can't meet the needs, but we can provide that response, that psychosocial support. I think the antidote to feeling lonely is connection. That's what Grace, you were saying. And there's a couple of movements going on about connections, and I know Sherry Baker's here. The community response networks in BC. That's a powerful vehicle for creating change and bringing community together, volunteers together, and having a response. It's addressing upstream elder abuse prevention, and it's in fact addressing some of the loneliness happening in communities. So that's a good thing that's happening. Compassionate Care Alliance is something new, really focusing on a good end-of-life experience for all of us as we approach the end of life, and that there's a better way. That rests on the theory that the health system can't pay for and do it all, that in our communities we're going to need to do better. Community-based senior services, a real movement based on really drawing from and moving from the recent Summit on Aging and saying there's a group of people that are investing in a new model and a new way of reaching into communities, community-based senior services, taking the best of what we can do and making it available to build. We're going to talk about technology solutions later in the pocket, so I'm going to stop there. Grace.
Oh, okay. Using the peer support model that we use at Seniors First BC. So there's a lot of seniors who are available to volunteer
what we do using the peer support model is to have seniors volunteering, do the education about frauds and scams, about what elder abuse is, what about powers of attorney and representation agreements. So we train them and they do the workshop presentation to their peers. And our workshop coordinator is a young woman in her 30s, and she often comes to me and says to me, "So, not listen to me," because she's young and she's 38, but she studies in her 30s. And often she gets this feeling that they're not able to listen to her because she's young. So that proves to you that people who are of the same age, like in their 50s, they'd rather be more comfortable when they're talking to their peers on a topic that's very difficult. Like, how do you prepare or appoint someone to take over your finances when you're no longer capable of making healthcare decisions when you're no longer capable? So making those decisions, they rely on someone who's their peer to give them that information, which is quite difficult, than to listen to someone younger and maybe not able to relate the life experiences that they're experiencing. So again, going back to the peer support model and using older people or seniors to promote that workshop, because we know that they're available and it's inexpensive. To run a workshop program with community-based senior volunteers is very, very inexpensive. They are there to provide their time and they are willing to be trained, and at the same time, they are, I would say, how would I say this? When you see them in your room and they're like, "Oh, what can I do for you? I have time, and I'm not going to some place in summer, but in summer I'm not available." So, and it also makes them feel valued, and they contribute as a group of seniors. So that's kind of, at the same time they're helping their peers, and at the same time they're also contributing to the society we live in. And so it's a win-win situation.
Just back to the role of the government, if I may. No, I think we always look to the government to solve our problems, and that's probably not a bad thing to do. But the change is only going to come if it comes from people like yourselves in this room. But we do need charismatic leadership. We need people or a person, someone to really raise this flag. People mentioned earlier the appointment of a UK Minister of Loneliness. That actually came about because of the campaign to end loneliness, which started back around 2012. It started because a philanthropist put up a significant amount of money, got the government on board because there was money. And it's really, the campaign connected organizations. It was less related to seniors one-on-one. It was connecting organizations. Why is that important? For the reasons you're hearing today. We need to leverage resources. There's lots and lots of good things being done. There's a plethora of things. But a lot of these things, addressing social isolation and loneliness, but they're really fragmented, and they're pockets, and there isn't the connections. Secondly, we're not sharing the knowledge across groups. And third, we often don't know what's working how well for whom. So we need more research, we need more dialogue, and as I said, we really need charismatic leadership to raise the profile of this issue, and then you'll see a greater government reaction.
Now, I think, Dr. Wister, you highlighted some of the gaps and challenges that we face, which was, leading into my next question as well. So, are there any other thoughts on the gaps that exist right now?
Well, I think that one of the things that I noticed about residential care was that we would have a calendar. If you walk into any residential care home, you'll see a calendar full of events. And you'll see, but if you look closely at that calendar, you'll see it's often the same events. We've got bingo, we've got, bus trips and games and entertainment, and they're very similar to the calendars. If you Google anybody's calendar, you'll see the same kind of things on it. And then, but if you go up into the home, if you're not looking closely enough, you'll just see it'll look like there's a lot going on. There's, there's a lot of people sitting over here doing this, there's some kind of, entertainment event over here. But if you look closely at the attendance statistic, you'll see it's the same 30% of the people that come to everything. And that other 70%, and that for me, that's been that way ever since I've been working in it. And so I know that it's really important that other 70%, who are they? Some of those people are in that group I talked about, they're socially isolated but not lonely. And they have, they have their own connections, they have their own way of being, and they're okay. But there's a group, and there's that vulnerable group in there, socially isolated and lonely in there. And so one of the things that I wanted to do, the thing that I noticed is that the friendly visiting approach doesn't work. And we've tried it, like all the homes I work in, we've tried all variations of forms of friendly visiting. We bring in our kind of helpless volunteers, we give them some training and orientation, and we send them out to go and visit these people who are difficult to visit. I know, I've done a lot of one-to-ones. I know that people who are socially isolated spend a lot of time in their rooms. They often don't talk much. They're struggling with something, they're grieving, and it's really difficult to visit. So even when I think about the volunteer training that I've done, the people are best of the best volunteers would give up their time. And so we would set up, this friendly visiting program. We think, we're going to get out of 70% that don't come to stuff, and then it would fall apart. So what I did is I created a new program. This is my PhD work. Is I created a program called Java Mentorship, and I invited a group of residents and volunteers to meet every week. They formed a team, and they called themselves mentors. And every week they meet and they talk about who's isolated in our community, who used to come to stuff, who stopped coming to stuff. What's happened to Mary down the hall? I used to see her all the time, she's not coming anymore. Who's just back from the hospital? Who just lost a husband? And so they have a conversation, and then they get some education. And this is the difference, that team approach, having them meet every week, and then they get some education, how to sit with someone who doesn't talk much. What do you say? How to support somebody who's grieving. One of the mentors said to me, if I go and visit someone who's grieving, I just lost my husband, I'm just going to sit down and cry with them. I'm probably the worst person. And I said, au contraire, you are the best person to go and sit with someone. So they learn how to be a good mentor, and then they go out, but they don't go alone, they go in pairs. And that's what makes the difference. So they go out, they have their team meeting, they get some education, and they go out in pairs and visit them. And so when they go to visit, it's not one-to-one, it's 3 people, and that makes it a group. And group intervention, generally speaking, I know there's some controversy around this, but group intervention, generally speaking, are more effective at reducing loneliness and social isolation than one-to-ones. So this approach of this Java mentorship approach, where you have a team and then going out and visiting in pairs. So what we did is we did a study in Ontario last year. We had 10 homes implement the program, and we did a baseline measurement, a 6-month measurement. And what we found is there was a significant decrease in loneliness and depression on the people that were doing the visiting and on the people who were being visited. And not only that, but among the people being visited, we had a 60% increase in their attendance and other programs. So it's so exciting. I mean, it's early research, it has to be replicated. We need to do a lot more work and look at it closely, but I'm so excited about it because I feel like it's something different. We finally jumped out of the box with this friendly visiting thing that we've been doing forever, and we're trying something different. So,
Very cool. Thank you, Kristine.
Thinking about the peer support and government and funding and stuff and grant applications, because I do write the grant applications at work. So I find that we all rely on money from outside, right? And so I find that most of the funding applications geared towards a one-time project, active living, and all sorts of things that may exclude people who are isolated, and the purpose of which is to find a solution for isolation, to prevent that and to stop it. But then the projects that are being forwarded or wanted by the funder, particularly government, is so limited to one-time things that you can't go beyond. And if you want to go beyond the project for a 1-year period, you're hooked. You don't have the money. And they want active living, they want all these things, and all things that do not actually include people who may be isolated because of disability, because of mental health issues, because of substance abuse issues, or because they're being prevented from going to those programs that you and I or some of the agencies have created. And at the same time, when we do programs we tend to create programs that are patterned or will get us the funding to satisfy the funder that we're going to do active living, we're going to do fall prevention, we're going to do all sorts of things, friendly visits and stuff. So when we do that, we sort of pattern into what has been done in the past. We look into the other grantees in the past, but at the same time, we forget that there are people in these pockets. Like Dr. Wister was saying, it's like they don't qualify and they don't meet the demand or the criteria. So what I wanted to do is like when you do apply for funding or you consider a program or a system that you want to address on social isolation. So you want to do friendly visit, for example. So when you do a friendly visit, are you going to do a friendly visit? You want to make sure that the person or the volunteer is doing that is not going to be at risk because the person who you're going to be including in your program may be abused or living with someone who's abusive. So you have to think about those things. And so when you do a friendly visit on the phone, you want to make sure that the person actually that is covered in this program have a phone or that have access to the phone. And if you want to do say for example, an active living thing that brings isolated people, are you going to do a hiking trip somewhere where the people with disabilities can participate? Or are you going to have someone who's going to be carrying them up to the mountain? So you have to think about things that may include people who are isolated because of a lot of barriers and then another is language. You're going to do a presentation around, say for example, powers of attorney, and you're going to talk in English. And how are you going to exclude people who don't speak English? So you have to think about how ways and means and how to include people who are technically isolated, who are not willing to come to your senior center, who are not going to the community programs, to the swimming classes, because they can and they don't know. And say, for example, you want to put up in a bulletin board your activities in your senior center, in your residential care facility. You have to put it out there where the person with a wheelchair can see it, or the person who's visually impaired can't see it. So we have to think about things that are very practical and at the same time applicable, because we're not going to be just doing things to satisfy the funder. We're here to do something to address the issue of isolation.
Yeah, clearly this is an extremely complicated problem. It really is, and the people who we want to help most are the most difficult to reach. And there's a lot of analogies with elder abuse, by the way, and some other issues. I think if I could just step back for 1 second, we really haven't talked about the causes and the explanations for this issue. And if I may, I would just say, I think that there's a number of things going on here. First of all, I kind of see societies on a pendulum shifting from being very open to very closed and back again. I think we moved recently into a lot of societies closed. And that means that it has profound effects on people. We look at Trumpism, we look at what's happened with the UK pulling out of the European Union. And so there's less tolerance. And this fuels things like ageism. It fuels things like people looking more after themselves than others. And so at a broad level, I think we've got, issues. Then, other explanations, we've looked at people who are isolated because of their environment, living alone, rural, remote, or being marginalized, and thus that discrimination probably being heightened, in all likelihood, etc. Various groups, caregivers, and we talked about these. The reasons for this problem are diverse, aren't they? And so our solutions must be as well. And so I'm listening to a lot of these suggestions, reflecting on the gaps that Charmaine has asked us to think about. And what we do know is that, I think participatory kinds of approaches that involve people for whom we intend to have the change is important. We need outreach programs, we need phone lines so that if you know of somebody who's isolated, maybe you can phone into that helpline. And there's ones in Niagara, Ontario, there's ones, there's others. Maybe people who are frontline workers need to be more aware of the issue and home, who do I go to support to help this person? We need all of those things, and that's a lot to ask for, but we know some things, what works, but we have a long ways to go. And I think the issue is that I think quite often, in trying to get money on a year-to-year basis and keep organizations going and do what you think is going to be most effective with the money you have, we often help people, but I don't think we're getting at the 10%. I think we're getting a few of the 10%. I think we're missing a lot of the 10%. And that's their captive, and maybe in the residential environment, I think you can focus a little more on it, but I think we're missing a lot of them. And how do we get to them? I think of one, and I'll shut up for just a second, but I'm a professor, come on, I'm going to just talk 50-minute lecture.
Where's the moderator?
One little anecdote, when we were going across the country, Seniors Council, I met, we were asked, can we stop and have someone come in and speak to us? And this older woman came in, quite elderly, and a Jewish woman at Baycrest, and she said, I went through the Holocaust, and I lost my husband, and then I started to get extremely depressed. I lived alone, and I became suicidal. And somebody in this Baycrest peer support outreach program visited her, and they got her out of her shell, and she ended up volunteering. And this had a profound effect on her life, and you would not believe this person who was speaking to us was the same person that she described just a year ago. So, it could be just one person that makes that difference. But again, we probably need, we absolutely need a variety of approaches. But I would like to see them done in a more systematic and connected kind of way. And that's where I think we do need to make this into some kind of a campaign, something that has a continuation to it and a dialogue that doesn't end.
I'm sure family and friend caregivers see a lot of the gaps that exist.
They do, Barb. I have this desire to be contentious.
Do it. We love it.
What do you think about, and I'll put my Grandpa Doug, I always think about Grandpa Doug and my family and my own experience of a stubbornly isolated man right in front of me as I'm thinking about the big picture. He absolutely always has been a quiet guy. Grandpa Doug doesn't reach out, and no matter what we've done as a family, he remains lonely. His wife died. He cared for her with dementia. He said, this is my job. I'm doing this. Buzz off. I don't want to go for coffee. He's now in care. Don't make me go for coffee. I don't want to. But I would love it if someone would come to me. So it took us 5 years to figure that one little thing out for him in his own social network of what he wanted. We were busy imposing what we thought as a family and the care facility. You must come for coffee. Get this man out of this room. So we all have constructs about how we're going to solve these problems. What we forgot to do was ask Grandpa Doug. Can you believe we spent 5 years not asking him? So there lies some great research opportunities that we can tap into that exist and yet to be created is asking people what they want. And often they're very different than what we think they want. I think about leadership on this issue. I heard a lot of examples that apply to point of care and interaction of what communities and facilities can do. But at what point do we have some leadership to help make this a priority in our province? I see a bit of a movement beginning and emerging. I see some thought leadership that's influencing leaders that I get to interact with and listen to about the importance of measuring social connectedness and behavior of people who are paid to provide care. What would happen if we began to reward people for social connectedness as opposed to how long did it take you to achieve that task and how many people did you see within that last 15-minute block? And along the way, we might find an intersection of how we treat people as humans and our task focus. Because I think we can agree, all of us, that everybody has a schedule, time is money, task, 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 and that you are penalized for not achieving those targets. So there's a bit of a tension between being human and achieving targets. We see that in health utilization measures. Get it done, but at what cost? Let's not make assumptions that quality of life, for me, includes meeting all of your targets. I have the right to live at risk. I've made choices in my life. So if we're to move a little upstream and use Pareto's law, that 80-20, maybe it's 90-10, and you mentioned the 10%, so I've got to jump into that. That's where I'm going to be a little contentious. And I'm going to say that some people in that 10% have chosen that right path. And that we can put a whole lot of resources into that 10%, or we could actually make a conscious decision to say, let's take about 80% and move it upstream, and let's pay attention to a culture that appreciates and pays attention to building our own social networks. Let's combine our own personal social networks with what the system can do, and then we have a better package. So, as we have this incredible aging population, we are it. If I look at my age, your age, some young people in here, we better get busy. If this is not the future we want, what are we doing personally to build our own capacity and not rely on the leadership of others, at the same time hoping it'll happen? I think we need to get busy, looking inward as well as outward.
Yeah, and that speaks, I just want to add to that, saying that speaks a bit to the amount of funding that gets given to social programs, right, which is minuscule compared to other. But I also wanted to say, to your point about the people that don't, that 10%, I think that it's really important when we talk about peer support, and that we're talking about matching. And that's one of the things I learned in our research, is that the importance of matching who goes to visit who. And so that you try to match people up in careers and interests, and that it's really important. But I want to say to you that peer support groups, they sound like people just sitting around drinking coffee. What could possibly be the outcome of that? We already do that. That's what some people have said to me. We already have coffee groups that we get together and we share. But I want to tell you, there's a fellow who I'll call John, who lived in northern British Columbia, and he had Huntington's, and they weren't able to manage his care, so he got moved down here and he moved into a care home. And he was a really big guy, and he terrified the other residents. He'd come walking down the hallway, and I don't know if you're familiar with Huntington's, but his arms would fling out like this when he was walking down the hallway, and people would just scatter when they saw him. He had to sit by himself in the dining room because he would knock dishes flying. And I looked at him and I thought, this man is, on moving in, is socially isolated and really going to suffer in this community unless we intervene. And so I went to see him, and I said, John, we've got a Japanese music club going. He goes, what is it? And I said, well, we hang out, we drink coffee, we chat. He said, sure, and he came. And so he walked into the Japanese music club, which had been going a couple of years then. And there was Mary, who was a longtime member of the Japanese music club. She was a tiny little woman. She looked at John coming in the door, and she looked at me, and she was going like, don't bring him in here. She was terrified of him. And I ignored her, and I said, John, this is the Japanese music club. This is the Japanese club, this is John. He sat down, and we have this talking stick that we pass around the group. The person who's holding the talking stick gets the floor. And when the talking stick came to him, he looked at this group and he told them how lonely he was, how he was missing his wife and his children up north. And we had, like, within a few minutes, we were passing this box of Kleenex around. We had a group cry together. By the time we got to the end of that group, they were gathered around him, they were hugging him, they were talking to him. And the next week, my office looked out over the dining room, and there was John sitting by himself at his table, whacking up the coffee cup flying, and Mary is way over on the other side of the dining room. She gets up, she hustles over to his table, mops up his coffee, goes and gets him another cup of coffee, and gives him a hug. And that is the power of peer support. It creates this ripple effect throughout the organization. And what was exciting about that, it wasn't just me who saw Mary do that, it was the entire dining room. And that came from one peer support group. One single peer support group has such an impact on that organization. It creates this ripple effect. So that's why I'm saying that peer support is really it should be at the foundation, and then it can take 100 different forms. But that's kind of why I'm so passionate about it and why I keep talking about it, because it has such a significant impact.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Doris. This is a topic I've been passionate about since 1977, when I first started working in the community. Now, today, I am fortunate enough and blessed enough to be an executive director of a health facility. But, that being said, and also very fortunate that we have a very high level of care. But we're trying to move away from the bingo model to the more personalized model. And I would like some feedback about the transition from one model to the other. Because there's always that feeling of bystanders saying, well, there's not much going on in here. It's pretty quiet. But what they don't know is there's some amazing things happening in small groups. And we hang on to bingo and all those things for the variety, but there's so much special work going on in the background. So how do you move away from the stigma that when you walk into a care facility, that there should be music blaring and entertainment and bingo and 50 people sitting around together, to having a more gentle approach, a more successful approach, and being more person-centered. There is a change process taking place in our organization, and I would like to hear some words about that.
Who wanted to jump in on that?
Well, you know what, I'd like to share something that I was involved with. This is a long time ago. And it wasn't seniors, it was kids. And it was kids with no skills for social interaction, autism, PDD, that spectrum disorder. We used to all think you had to look busy and exactly the same kind of thing. And in our transformation, it was to focus on, in this place, it's what matters most to people. It's in this place, recognizing that you don't need 10 friends, just one is okay. And that even posting on the wall a phrase, a quote, or a saying that cues the staff, cues the families coming to visit, and cues funders that we're changing. And so we had to be explicit. We had to tell people this is what's happening. We had to share. So communication, maybe do a campaign internally and externally about what your transition is and why. It's evidence-based, we know that you need to try something new, and it's only about the best possible outcome for people, and that's why we're doing it. So communication and co-creation with your staff and your people. Patient and family-centered and person and family-centered means bringing them all together to create that change and to voice it.
Our family council is really involved.
That's awesome. She said our family council's all involved. That's a great thing. Involve your family councils.
Karen Bailey, I'm CEO of Meadow Place and I'm BC Care President. There's a very big difference between being alone and being lonely. I use my 87-year-old mom as an example. She loves being alone. She does not like people in her space. And so I really applaud your suggestion about the peer support group. I think that's something that I can take away from this as something that we could absolutely build on, especially on a campus model, because we have lots of peers with different abilities, and I don't think we've taken the advantage of using them to support each other. So I thank you for that idea. So when we have lots of numbers, where do you think the biggest bang for the buck would be for us to make changes?
Well, I'll just go back to, I feel like I'm a broken record, but the solution, I think, to loneliness is right in front of us, and it's free, and that is the peer support. And what we need to do, though, is to create a model around it so that it can happen. Because you think it would happen naturally, that people would just, you think peers would just reach out and help each other. But I think there's something about residential care that I'm sure you're aware of, about people becoming passive recipients of care. And it's really difficult to kind of break that out. They think as soon as they cross that invisible dividing line from being a citizen to being a resident, that changes. So That's why I think this, having structured peer support programming is really important. Because, I've had the staff tell me, oh, peer support's a great idea. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get it going. I don't know how to facilitate a peer support group. So part of what we did with these programs is that we created training modules, we created training videos, and there's a blog going, and we're teaching people how to become a peer support person. Not a peer support worker, because those are paid, which is different. The peer support is free, it's volunteer. And communities have volunteers, and we're not using them. We lose our volunteers because we don't give them specific work to do. I know that if they don't feel like they're useful in something, and so this program can be run by volunteers, and it is being run by volunteers and by families. In the United States, the Java Music Club is actually facilitated by residents in affordable housing themselves. They facilitate. In Ontario, there's a resident who does the Java Music Club. She's in a wheelchair. She takes the Java Music Club cart with all the stuff on it, and she wheels herself into the memory care neighborhood, and she facilitates the program. So you see what I mean? Like, if you have a huge community, you have hundreds and hundreds of people there, let's put them to work. Let's give them something to do and give them a structure to do it with. And I think that's the way forward for us, for sure.
I concur that volunteerism across a number of areas is really important. It's important because I think that giving back, generatively to others is probably one of the most rewarding things that people can experience. And what's really surprising to me when I look at some of the patterns involved in the Canadian longitudinal study of aging, largest longitudinal study in Canada, 51,000 people, and some of you probably know about it. Many of you, collecting blood and physiological data, but all the way to measures of loneliness and so on and so forth. What was surprising to me was that I assumed that there's a fairly clear age group pattern to loneliness and social isolation. That's really, older people, and you get older, you're more likely. Well, guess what? People 45 to 64 have almost as high as rates of loneliness and social isolation. So something's going on here. And I think we need to have a real cultural, societal shift in how we connect as a community. And we're losing some of that. Now, the reasons for that loneliness and social isolation at different ages is different. I know that. But you see pockets, and if you're a person, a woman, 45 to 50, who's widowed at younger than normal age, that's going to put you at a pretty severe risk. So there's different reasons, but I think peer support volunteers, and I can't say enough about that, but I do believe that we're losing something that we have to regain. And we better be very careful because it's a slippery slope and it's hard to get back.
I'm Canada. I grew up in the Philippines where there's no such thing as social isolation. Like, it's something new here. It's like everybody talks to somebody. It's a culture where people they just drop in the house and they, hey, hello, you can have dinner or something, have lunch. Here you have to schedule visits. Here you have to, anything is scheduled because I'm busy. We're all busy. So when I arrived here 20 years ago, I'm like, oh, okay, I can call you anytime. So I think it's what Andrew was saying, it's like a cultural shift we need to think about. Because the people from when Canada was a small population, I'm sure people just drop by their houses or talk. So there's been a huge change. And so what happened here? That we're only wanting to, schedule somebody. You can't come because I'm busy, and you can call me because I have a timetable to do, and you're not my family, or we're not friends with you, and I'm like, oh, you're not helping in my career, or your work from another agency will not help me in my work. So I think again, it's connection. So what I hear from people who call us, older adults and also service providers, is a lack of knowledge of what is available in the other service areas for seniors. They don't know what is available. Family caregivers I know some people know about that, but not a lot of people would know about that. Not a lot of people would know about what we do at Seniors First BC, but CRN. So what are we doing that we don't know this when we're like, our heads down there and doing something, busy, probably doing nothing except filling up forms, reading forms and all those things. So I think it's the practical thing is what I want to do in terms of the cost that we receive is please increase your knowledge about the resources in your community. Go out there and network with other service providers so that you will learn about what their services are, so that you're able to connect your clients and the people or all the people that you serve to the other services that you cannot provide. It would benefit them to not do all the work that, because there are other people in your community that can do the work better than you. All you have to do is make connections. We hold each other's hand.
It's wonderful. We have time for one more question.
Thank you. My name is Mary. I'm spiritual and community care at Beulah Gardens. And I'm listening to this and I hear so much about peer support and the help. The question I have is how do we jump over what I see as a divide between how we support and care for those who are older adults and I include myself in that actually, but to the place of eldership where it's not just supporting them or the people that we are working for are not just receiving from us or observing or being distracted, but actually to this place that no matter with their frailties or even limitations and even growing limitations and frailties, there is a sense of eldership or something that they have to offer us. How can you speak how we can connect with that? Because it feels like that's the missing piece, that identity of self that is always there no matter.
I love that question. That is deeply insightful. I'm thinking about reciprocity and the exchange of why anything's meaningful in the first place, why you don't feel lonely versus why you do, whether you're 20 or 95. And it has to do with a feeling, usually of reciprocity is included. So a friend would give you, take, you give you, take it. In that respect, doing to, Kristine talked about that, as opposed to doing with. Doing with means you share something with me, I share something with you. So if you look at exchange analysis, a little bit of psychology there, that when we interact as human beings, we do it better when we think about the other person as a tennis game, back and forth and back and forth. And let's go back to large aggregate care and how busy we are. We're too busy for reciprocity. We're doing too. So if we're to really transform care and living well, relieving isolation and having a better future, we need to think more carefully about how we treat each other. And I don't care where you are. So I don't think there's anything wrong with bingo, actually. I've seen a tremendous number of people enjoying that. What the problem with that is taking the same brush across all people. I know it's most convenient and you know, with our limited ability and capacity, but we need to segment those people that are really at risk or are already very, very isolated. Like your story, you don't want to just leave them, but you don't need to have that level of intervention and intensity with everybody. Bingo's okay. So I'm just, as a metaphor, bingo's okay for some people, but not others. So maybe we can get more sophisticated in looking at our population and asking them, while they're still able, to help identify what's a good life to them. And that's more about reciprocity too.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that we haven't talked about dementia at all, even though there's so many residential care providers here. And I just want to say that people living with moderate to advanced dementia are very capable of engaging peer support. And I know when we created the General Memory Care Program, I had a nurse say to me, Kristine, surely you're not suggesting that people with advanced dementia can engage in peer support. And I said to her, not only can they do it, but they're magnificent at it, if you put the right supports in place. When the people were setting up and having the peer support happen, if they know what they're doing, it's fantastic. I've seen people reach out, turn to each other, shake a hand,
and connect with each other in such a meaningful way. People are completely nonverbal. So I just want to put that in the picture too, that just because people have dementia doesn't mean that they can't contribute, that they have something to give. If we set that up, if we put that structure and that model in place, that allows them to do that.
Can I just add, when people call us, the seniors, to be an information line, sometimes they express like, I don't know what to do. So what we usually ask would be, what do you want to do? So here are the options that I can help you with. So you can choose and decide which one you would like, and you can tell me what else you want to do. So it's asking them what they want to do. We call it empowerment instead of like, again, Andrew was talking about ageism. We think about somebody who's old, who looks old. We have ageist attitudes where it's, oh, she can do this, he can do this. I want to take over and do things for you. That person's still capable. Dementia does not make you incapable. So again, it's empowerment. Listen and be able to not impose your values and your thinking, and people can live in place of record. People can live in risk and they can choose to do what they want. If they want to eat pizza for one reason, that's fine. And they know the consequences of what they're doing. And it may not be what we want to do, but that's what they want to do as long as they're capable. They're able to make decisions for themselves. And we need to empower that.
I think we could probably keep this going for a lot longer. It's such a fascinating and important topic. But unfortunately, we do need to wrap this up. So perhaps I'll just an opportunity for a few closing remarks from each of you. Start with Kristine.
Yeah, well, I agree. I love the fact that we're talking about it, and like Andrew said, it's a very complex